right, thank you, Lisa. Big shoes to fill here with all the build-up. I've been. Oh, and I thought this was a book study, so I brought my books. When you asked me, my mind was like, do what? But I was told early on when I first arrived here that when somebody asked you to do something for AA, you just say yes, and you take it from there. So I've got some notes so I can kind of stay on track here. But my name is Dan, and I am an alcoholic. Amen. There's no question about that. There was a question about it, actually, before the first time I went to AA. And in my first meeting, I walked out thinking, damn, I'm one of them. Oh, no. But, so, let's see. Born, that happened, on December 25th, 1955 in Washington, D.C. Actually, it was at Bethesda, Maryland, at the Naval Hospital. My dad was a submariner for his career. Went through World War II in one of those things. I can't imagine. And we lived a number of places. Miami, Oxnard, California, but pretty much settled in the Connecticut area near that's kind of the headquarters for the submarine base up that way. And that's where they build a lot of the boats too. But so, kind of, growing up in a small town, and I was pretty much down the straight and narrow, athlete, good grades, all that stuff. And my first real drinking experience, though, was in my senior year of high school. We'd finished cross-country season, and somebody said, hey, we're going to have a party over at this guy's house. End-of-season party. So I was like, oh, okay. And then somebody said, you got to chip in $2, which, back then, gas was 25 cents a gallon. I had a Volkswagen Beetle. Maybe I could get $2 in it, if it was really on fumes. But so anyway, I was like, okay, well, I'll cough up to $2, and we got there, and there's boxes on the ground outside. It was probably in the 30s. It's late November in Connecticut, so it's kind of like a refrigerator. And in these boxes were 4 quart bottles of Budweiser beer. I had tasted beer as a kid. My grandmother was full-blooded German, so she slipped me little sips of beer occasionally. But by the way, she would open a bottle of beer and split it with somebody. It's like, what is that? But so we've got these quart bottles of Bud. So we get going, and darn if I didn't drink the first one in, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, more like 5. Got that thing down pretty good. A lot of burping, and and I think somebody said, you might want to slow down a little bit. We got the whole night here. So I think I was working my way through the second one, and somebody else showed up at the party with something called Tango, which I don't know what that was, but it was this orange thing in a bottle. It looked really good. It was bright orange. I think it had Tang, and we were raised in the 60s like Tang, the astronauts drink that, right? That's good for you. Of course, this was mostly vodka with the orange, with the orange coloring, I don't know. So I took a few swigs of that. Well, I overshot the mark. Everything kind of launched into the shrubs, and but it was a blast. I don't know really what happened that night. We stumbled through some woods in the dark, which in Connecticut is like mostly rocks and trees, and bumping into things, going through briars. Snuck into the drive-in theater. The only thing I remember about that was somebody saying, "Hey, somebody's chasing us." So we headed for the opposite fence, went over that, and got out of there. And a great adventure was had, at least in my opinion. And somebody gave me a ride home. They parked a few houses down so nobody would see their car as far as who brought Dan home. And I managed to get in the house, and it was a big uproar. My dad wasn't there at the time, but my mother and my brother, who had recently come back from Vietnam, was there, and he thought it was hilarious. My mom didn't think it was that hilarious. So splitting headache, just couldn't feel worse the next day. But thinking, man, like when can we do that again? That was an adventure, That was great. And I recall these guys. We did do. I didn't right away plunge headlong into alcoholism, but we did a little bit more. I remember a guy came up with this plan where we're all going to go to a bar. And back then, of course, there weren't picture IDs for licenses, so all you had to do was find somebody with kind of the same hair color and eye color and memorize everything, their birth date and address and all, because it was a paper ID. So this guy comes up with this bar. It's like, why are we going to this bar 2 towns away? And I don't know the answer to that, but anyway, it was down by the dock, where the longshoremen go. The real men drink here. Yeah. So we go down to this place, and I got my stuff memorized, and man, I'm ready, and very colorful bar. The bartender and owner was this guy. He'd been a boxer, had pictures all around, like in the 1920s and 30s. So he comes up and, okay, boys, let's see your IDs, and we're all got them out, and I'm kind of like the furthest away from him. So they go to the one by one. And the guy turns and looks at me, and I'm ready to go, and he goes, "Oh, you're a regular. I don't need to see your ID." My 3 buddies' heads they're on swivels, what? You're a regular? Yeah, how you doing? It's good to see you, So we did a lot, we did that a few times. That was short-lived. I think on the 3rd trip, one evening I was backing out of the parking lot, and I'm hearing this hideous sound, what is that noise? It was the car next to me that I was just rubbing up against, and and the door to the restaurant bar pops open, in the back, and people will come running out looking drive, boom, got the heck out of there and never went back. So that was about the extent of my high school drinking career, and I pretty much, got back on the straight and narrow for a while, and I would, occasionally drink here and there, at a party at college, but in general, I really didn't fall into it right away. And then I got into a period where that was my sort of hippie head stoner phase for, I don't know, about 3 years or so. And when your mouth's that dry, you just don't really want to drink alcohol. So I kind of did that for a while and managed to somehow get a college degree. And so the college contacts me and they said, "Hey, we've placed some people at this company and they're looking for someone else. Are you interested?" And it was Union Carbide Chemicals, and the job was in Houston, Texas. And I said, "Wow, Houston, Texas. I've never been there. I'd never even been to Texas." I'd driven around the country during my other phase there on a motorcycle, and I had this picture of Texas of being like southern Utah, oh man, Red Rock country, this will be cool. So I fly in here and it's just fog and soupy rain, and it's wow, it's really green here. But anyway, I interviewed well and got the job and said, okay, I'm moving to Houston, Texas. And so I come down here, and it was a sweet deal. They pay for whatever my expenses are, and initially put me up in a hotel and give me a company car, and just take your time, find a place. We'll set you up with someone to show you around apartments and this, that, and the other, and get all settled in. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I'm here for a few days, and I start to get really lonely. It's like, man, I'm just like 2,000 miles away from anybody I know. And so I remembered that my girlfriend's best friend, her brother, had moved to Houston. And I never did like that guy, but anyway, it's somebody. So I go back to my girlfriend. She talks her, I get a way to contact this guy. And I'm living in Southwest Houston. That was kind of this is 1978. So, I mean, Houston was all cranes downtown. The city was being built. It was like go town. People were coming in fast. And so I look up this guy, and sure enough, I find him, and he's sharing a place with some other guys from the neighboring town over there in Norwich, Connecticut. So I go over and meet up with them, and they're all daily drinkers. So I just like, oh, this is what we do. Okay, so so I start going over there in the evenings. I got nowhere else to go, and kind of get rolling. And before I move down, I need to back up a step. When I heard that I was going to go to Houston, I was still in the other stuff phase, and I'd known about this guy in our town, Paul, who moved to Houston, and he got busted for some weed, and he was in prison for a year. And I'm like, wow, they're really serious in Texas about this. Because in Connecticut, they were kind of like, if you're a dealer, yeah, you're in trouble, but otherwise, whatever. So I thought, what am I going to do? And before I moved, it just kind of clicked to like, oh, well, I always enjoyed drinking. I'll just do that. That's legal, That was my big solution. So I got started, and I really took off immediately. I mean, it was just wild times back then. These guys lived in a complex that had a disco inside of the complex. Yeah, you've been there. Yeah. Everybody, and that. Yeah. And that was actually pretty common. There were several of those, and it was just big time. It was Saturday Night Fever days, and the booze was flowing, and man, I was drinking it. And then my girlfriend moved down, and so I really didn't change anything, and the drinking kept going. And I don't know, we just kind of did that whole partying thing for, I don't know, a couple of years, and I mean, just really to the max. I mean, I would say idiotic things like, well, let me back up a step. A guy had come down from Connecticut to visit, I guess to see if he was going to move down here too, and he kind of was with us for a few days and went back, and then word got back to me that he went back and told everybody up there, we're a bunch of alcoholics down here. And I was really offended by that, because I was walking around telling people, alcoholics, we drink way more than alcoholics. There's no way alcoholics can hang with us, okay? We're no mere alcoholics. Come on, I'm insulted here. But I didn't know what the word meant. So anyway, there was a lot of that going, and then of course, we began to age and get married and have kids and age, like 25, getting up there, and everybody kind of started to settle down, thinking about buying houses and doing those, not partying every day, and so I don't know, it seemed like I had a long period where it wasn't that, all out partying, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier, it's not like I wasn't a daily drinker for a while, but when I drank, it was absolutely on. And I might go a few days or a few weeks, and I remember when I first got to AA, people would have these discussions about, a daily, periodic versus a daily drinker, and my conclusion is, I was a periodic until I drank, and then I was a daily drinker. Until I hit yet another pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, and then I would back off for a little bit. So I was kind of going through this phase that I somehow made work, for years. So anyway, like I said, houses and kids and stuff came on, and I don't know, I drank a lot. I kind of have this mathematical mind. I think in ratios and in percentages and things like that. And I just had this belief that, regular people, their one drink is my 3, and I'm just different than them. So their 3 is my 9. Yeah. And it's just a kind of this translation. It's like so. It just didn't seem like I was doing anything wrong. And it says in our book, the great obsession of every alcoholic is to control and enjoy his drinking. And I think for the longest time, I never really absorbed that. To me, I just kind of thought the great obsession was to drink alcoholically, just to drink your face off to the max. But then I wondered, why did it go on for 20, 25 years? Why couldn't I have seen the writing on the wall sooner? It says we have no regrets, but I think to some degree, I do have a regret that, I wish 5 years, 10 years, something that I could have backed off a little earlier on it. But it took what it took. That's kind of the conclusion I've come to, and maybe that's why I'm a person who, I went to my first, let me kind of back up another step. My life was falling apart. So, here I am at 43 years old, and just nothing's right. Finances, relationship with my wife and kids, and it's just nothing's going well. And we were members of a church, and and I was trying to be the stand up guy and do everything right, and just nothing was working. And so I made an appointment and counseled with the pastor of the church, and we got together for lunch and chatted, and I don't know what all I said, and he came up with this recommendation. He said, "Well, I think I want to set you up and have you counsel with this other guy who was a fairly recent member of the church." And I had heard somebody say that he's a member of AA too. And I just kind of let that go, like, okay, whatever. But so the pastor comes up with this idea, is I think you should do some counseling with this guy. And I never, did the math. I should talk to the only alcoholic that we know of in the church. Because I've got all these other problems. The drinking, I've got that under control. So I get down, I talk to Billy, and I'm telling him about all my problems, and he shows up at the first meeting. We met in a little trailer at the church, and he had this book sitting down on the table, and I kind of spotted it, and I'm like, yeah, I see you got that book. Yeah, what's that all about? And he did it by the book. I think it even says in working with others where, if your prospect is really not ready, don't even open the book. And he didn't. He didn't push it on me, whatsoever. He listened to all these things I had to say. And I think it was in the second meeting or whatever, boy, did he set a trap. He got, listening to all my stuff, and he kind of said, so when all these bad things happen, how did he put it? It was more like, okay, it's not every time you drink that all these bad things happen, but am I getting this right?
Every time the bad things happen.
Every time the bad things happen, drinking's involved in it. And he helped me connect the dots, and I could see it. And then he suggested maybe it would be better if you did something different, like not drink. And I'm kind of, So I agree. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to not drink. Well, I'm an alcoholic. So that might work for a few days, or actually, I'll tell you what. I think that was my longest, after, 20 some years, that was the longest stretch I went. I white knuckled it for, I don't know, like 4 months or more. It was, to me, it was, but my mind started saying, there's no alcoholic that can do that. So there's no way you're an alcoholic, because an alcoholic they can't do that. So you can have a drink. Which I did. And I remember, clear as day, we were at a little Mexican restaurant down Luetta by Klein High School. We'd go there a lot. And I made sure I even positioned myself like across the table from her, with the kids all in the middle. And I think she was, real pleased that I hadn't been drinking for a while, and so she orders a margarita. She's one of those people that can do that. Maybe not even finish it. That's really weird. That's strange. So I order a margarita and I don't know, Bohemia. And I remember looking across the table and seeing the look of horror on her face, like, oh no, he's doing it again. And I reassured her, like, just one margarita. It's Mexican food. I mean, come on. Mexican beer, margarita, Mexican food. Makes sense, Well, it didn't stop there. And so I kind of went on my last binge. I don't know. I don't even know how long that lasted. I think only a couple or 3 weeks. In just, I remember my last drunk, it almost like a videotape. And I have a horrible memory. I mean, I can't tell you what I ate for lunch yesterday. But I just remember everything about that. I just, out of thin air, invented some beef with my wife of something she did wrong to me, and I was like so offended, and it was just horrible, and she felt bad, I could tell, wondering like, what the hell was it? And I'm like, I can't even tell you, it's so bad. And I had this thing all arranged, so I storm out of the house. Well, like, I got this thing arranged. I got a cooler in the car with beer and wine. I'm driving across town near where I work, and our work had a shower, so I had all this figured out. I could get close enough to work where I could, I wouldn't have to drive far drunk, and then, set an alarm and get up before everybody got to work and run in and shower. So I had the whole thing all, figured out. And I got so blitzed and blasted, and, that was October. It started off on October 6th, and it, went up to like 3 in the morning of October 7th. And I went in there, I took a shower, tried to go to work. Went into the office, and I was in like that. It's a horrible state where the hangover hasn't even come yet. But you stopped drinking, and you're just like in this like quasi weird, like, oh my God, this is bad. And I told my boss, like, man, I got something. I don't want to make everybody sick. I got to get out of here. And I managed to get back home. I called Billy and I said, I think I need to go to one of those A&A meetings. And I was so bad off. I mean, the alcohol poisoning was hideous that I couldn't even make it till the next day. And I went over to the Champions Club, and they had a 4:00 meeting on the schedule. And so I got there and walked in, but they were like, "Oh yeah, we don't have that meeting anymore. It's just not well attended." By the way, they've restored it, but back that day that I went, they didn't have it, and they said we got one at 6. So I went and sat in my car, listened to the Astros National League team, lose once again to the Braves. That was the story of the 1990s, by the way. And I knew I couldn't leave that parking lot. If I did, I didn't know what would happen. And I went there. I went there, and I didn't know what the definition of an alcoholic was. I didn't know that I was. I didn't know. We call it the last house on the block. I just ran out of anywhere to go and anyone else to talk to. There was just nothing left. And I went in to the 6 o'clock meeting, and they read more about alcoholism. And I was pretty paranoid at the time, too. I thought my sponsor faxed over some sort of dossier to these people. Like, what the hell is this? I did every one of those things, except not taking a trip. I think that's the only one I didn't do. All the rest of them I did. And I just, right from that first, I can't tell you beyond that anything specifically that anybody said, but I walked out of there, and before I even started my car, I sat down and I thought, as I said earlier, it's like, damn, I'm an alcoholic. and I knew it. And like I say, I do regret how long I went at it, and I think maybe that's why, I hate this term, one-ship wonder. But, from that first meeting on, I haven't had a drink. And I paid attention. I mean, I was just absolutely, I had nothing in terms of, just ego smashed. And of course, the good people of Champions did a great job of smashing it even further. They weren't very nice to me. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. With their fingers on their chest. Like, what the hell, man? There were some rough ones there, I'll tell you. If you do what we do, you get what we got. Well, I was ready to do anything. And Billy became my sponsor, and just started going through it. And I went to, he first, we got back together, and he gave me the 90 and 90, and I think he saw this, whatever look he saw on my face, he said, well, for you, let's start with 30 and 30. I think I was like, what? But right away, I realized I needed this deal, and so I was going to the meetings every single evening, and I worked across town, down by I-10 and Highway 6 in that Park 10 area, and man, I found a great lunch meeting over on Derry Ashford at the Jewish Community Center. There was people. I remember somebody telling me, and I'm like 2 weeks sober. They're like, "See those 4 people?" I'm like, "Yeah." They got 100 and what did he say? They got like 137 years between them. I'm like, what? I've got my my desire chip in my pocket. What does that mean? Like, I don't understand that. Like, including weekends? I mean, what are you talking about? But it was pretty cool. In fact, one of the guys there, he was a native-born Houstonian, but he had lived in L.A. working for Chevron, an engineer. And I remember him telling me, he's like, yeah, I got 12-stepped by Chuck C. And I'm like, who? I don't know these people. Who's he talking about? Who the hell's Chuck C? But I did later read Chuck C's book. And that's cool. But, it was great to be with, other alcoholics that just bring you along. You just don't know nothing. And you can't think, and your mind's not functioning. I heard somebody put it like this. It's like, the committee, my mind got up about 30 minutes before me and did, a double shot of espresso and was sitting there on my nightstand like, come on, wake up, it's time to go. And as soon as I got out of bed, everything was going 90 miles an hour. But I started doing this stuff, and something started to happen. In fact, I remember calling my sponsor once, I don't know, with 2 months or so sober, saying, Billy, something's wrong. Well, he was used to that. I called every day. Billy, something's wrong. What is it, Well, I don't know. And he, being a good sponsor, he'd say smart things like, well, who would be asked that might know? Or if you did know, what would it be? Like, well, I don't know. And he's like, so I'm describing it, and it's like, basically, it was serenity. It was like nothing was wrong, and everything had quieted. And it was like, and I finally said, I think it's like, I'm just like, okay. But I'd never really, everything was like way up here or totally in the pits, It was just, that was it. It was just bouncing back and forth. I never had that where everything just kind of settled down and I could just breathe, So, and again, if AA has done anything for you like it's done for me, you just got to love it. And I love AA. I love you people, and everybody I've met along the way. My job changed. Well, actually, even the one I started out in, I would have to travel pretty regularly. About every 6 weeks, I'd have to go on this sort of whirlwind tour. I ran sales for a product line, but it was a small company, and so you worked through manufacturers' reps all around the country. And so like I said, I'd have these trips, and they were kind of grueling. You'd be 4 or 5 cities in a week, where you're, flying somewhere the evening before, getting in your hotel, going, working there the whole day, having to go to the airport, catch another flight, and rent a car on the next end, and get to that hotel, and, on and on and on. So these things were pretty grueling as it was, and I think I was 2 weeks sober when I was going to have to take my first trip. And boy, I had a lot of anxiety about that. And there's one of the many true statements in the big book is that, if you have a purpose of somewhere you have to be, you can do it. And we can go anywhere. So I had an inauspicious start. I go to the Intercontinental Airport, and they were like, hey, they call me up. We got an open seat in first class. We'll upgrade you. I'm like, oh, okay, first class, cool. I'd never sat in first class. So I get on there, and this younger guy sitting next to me, he was an enterprise software guy, and he's pounding down this gin and tonic, and he's laughing, and he's a Brit, and he's really loud, and I don't know how many drinks he'd already had. And he's just like spraying, and it's like fumes of alcohol, gin. I got a cloud of Tanqueray on my head, I was like, man. And he had at least 2 of those before we took off, and another one, and then fortunately he passed out cold. So I got past that, and I was like, man, this is an interesting start to this trip. But I was okay. I worked that first day in Pittsburgh, and then I had made a stupid mistake. I looked at the map, and my next city was Dayton, Ohio, and I thought, that looks like about drive from Houston to Dallas. I'm just going to drive it instead of messing around with the airport. Well, it was really about a 4-hour drive, and I learned some weeks later, somebody at a meeting was talking about halls. I'm like, what is that? And they started describing it. I'm like, oh. That night I drove from Pittsburgh to Dayton. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And I was in bad shape. I was coming in there hurting. But when I would go on these trips, of course, back then we had cell phones, but all you could do is make phone calls on them. You could text, but you'd have to like C was hitting the A button 3 times. It wasn't worth doing it, Screw it, So So I would map it out. I would look up, I'd hook up with intergroups, and I'd figure out where meetings were, and I'd get a few of them, and I'd see where my hotel was, and print maps. So, I do that for my appointments. I also did it for how to get to AA meetings. And I remember pulling into a meeting down in the basement of a Catholic church. A lot of them in the Northeast are in the basements of Catholic churches. I guess Father Ed Dowling started that or something. I don't know. But and I don't know. It was a speaker meeting, and again, like one of these where I couldn't tell you a word the lady said, but it was just a room full of alcoholics, and I was okay. And I got through the rest of my trip. I think I went to a meeting in Chicago and one in Baltimore, and survived the trip, and figured out that I could do that and be okay. And I had some more work experiences, related to AA. I got into a different job after that, and this company was based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was just me and my boss that worked here in Houston. And they sent me to Charlotte for training for 3 weeks. It's like, man, 3 weeks away from home, that's a long time. What am I going to do? And of course, it's just, I was still, still early days of sobriety. And, you're in a different, thousands of miles away from anybody that knows you with an expense account. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want. But again, I got hooked up right away with an AA group there, and almost kind of became like part of that group since I was there for 3 weeks. And the second weekend, they had the state convention in Charlotte. So I spent the whole weekend there and just listened to speaker after speaker. And again, I didn't know any of these people. Later on, I kind of found out, oh, wow, these are some pretty famous people. But it's just kind of funny how that stuff worked out. Another time I remember I was planning off on a work trip down to Corpus Christi, and my sister had called ahead before I was going to make that trip and said, hey, she, by the way, has got her 34-year chip. This is my older sister. She said, hey, I'm going to go to San Antonio to this worldwide meeting. And this was what? When was that? 2010, was it? Yeah. Yeah. And so I remember going down and doing my work in Corpus, and then that Friday evening, running up to San Antonio and hooking up with my sister and brother-in-law Bob. He was a good sport. He'd go to some of the Al-Anon stuff, but he tolerated us. And boy, that was just a wonderful time. So it's just kind of funny. I think back at some of these things in my history of coming along, and I'll tell you what, I'll never forget. I mean, as great as all of those World Conference meetings were, I remember being, seeing Earl, not knowing it was Earl, and stuff like that. But I remember that closing ceremony when, I don't know, 120 flags, or, all these people from all the countries came out and went up on the stage, and I was 14,000 or so of us in there, said the ending prayer. And man, it gives me chills still, to recall just that stuff. So, I mean, I think of these kinds of experiences and things in AA, and again, it's just, and I understand. I mean, people out there can't necessarily relate and don't necessarily need to because they're out there and they're okay. But there's just something about anytime I'm in these rooms and with you folks. Let's see. Some of the stuff. Bear with me a second. Get back to my notes. I remember, it's kind of funny because a lot of people, I certainly had hit my bottom in terms of drinking and spiritually, before I got in here. But I'm a person who, I kind of went downhill financially and personally in my first couple of years. It's like, man, I'm like doing everything right, and like things were getting worse and worse, and Um, my income, I kind of got switched into different jobs. I had some long periods of unemployment, and then when I got a job, it was about half the pay that I'd had before, and I think maybe looking back on it, sometimes you get perspective, I guess, when you've done this thing for a while. And it could be that, I'd said that third step prayer, and the God of my understanding removed these things that were in the way. Because you know what? We ate. My kids still had good clothes. We had a place to live. We managed to pay the bills, barely. Sometimes it was very dicey. But looking back on it, it's like, before I would never have thought that our family could have survived, through that. But somehow it just happened. So it's just amazing things, Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. A lot of times, that topic will come up, spirituality, spiritual awakening, in a meeting, and it's just hard to put into words, and I'm usually left saying it's just like everything's okay, like that feeling I first experienced when I called my speaker, my sponsor up and said something's wrong. It's like you just realize that you can depend on, you've got this being out there that cares, and you can depend on it. And I don't even need a whole lot more understanding than that. And I was the religious guy. I brought these books, so let me read something out of one of them. If I were to describe myself, I can't describe myself better than the way Mr. Wilson does here on the 12 and 12 in step 2. Let's take the guy full of faith but still reeking of alcohol. He believes he's devout. His religious observance is scrupulous. He's sure he still believes in God, but suspects God doesn't believe in him. And skipping down, to clergymen, doctors, friends, families, the alcoholic who means well and tries hard is a heartbreaking riddle. But to most AAs, he's not. There are too many of us who've been just like him, and we found the riddle's answer. The answer has to do with the quality of faith rather than quantity. This has been our blind spot. We supposed we had humility when we really hadn't. Upon honest appraisal, we found we'd only been superficial. We're going to the other extreme. We wallowed in emotionalism and had mistaken it for a true religious feeling. In both cases, we were asking for something for nothing. The fact was, we really hadn't cleaned house so that the grace of God could enter us and expel the obsession. In no deep or meaningful sense had we ever taken stock of ourselves, made amends to those we'd harmed, freely given to another human being without any demand for reward. We'd not even prayed rightly. We always said, "Grant me my wishes," instead of "Thy will be done." The love of God and man we understood not at all, and therefore we remain self-deceived and so incapable of receiving enough grace to restore us to sanity. And that's a lot of words there, but that just exactly describes me. I could tell you all sorts of things about the Bible and point to things I'd read hundreds of times and memorized and whatnot, and yet what I learned in AA is how to rely on God, how to actually depend on God, how to lean in and truly, put all my eggs in that basket and say, hey, I'm taking my hands off. And just amazing things happen. There's just so much power there when I give up the power that I think I have, but I don't even have. It's just a funny turn of events. One of the things, I look back there and I see the group conscious meeting on the whiteboard, and that's an important thing, to participate in and I haven't. But so I need to go to one of those, Lisa.
716.
But I feel like in every AA meeting I've ever been in, there's this group conscious. Right from the get-go, I just couldn't explain it, but something happened. And again, in those early days, I mean, I was just a wreck outside of meetings. But I'd come in and I'd be a wreck, and everything's going 90 miles an hour. And usually within 5 or 10 minutes, it all just like, I was in the moment. You know, and I get that in every meeting where I just like get in the moment. I'm with whoever's sharing, you know, on what they're talking about, and it's like, that's me. I've been there. I do that. You know, I know that. And when I hear the solution, again, I mean, I just don't know what else to say, but I love AA. I really do. You know, a couple of things. I mentioned Chuck C. earlier. You know, he has a definition of ego of its conscious separation. And I've kind of, you know, thought about, you know, what does that actually mean? And I think, I mean, we're all individual people. We're units. We're individuals. You know, we have DNA, and you can take a retina scan and fingerprints and say, I'm a unique individual. But that's all I was in before I got here. And what I find is being part of the group, there's just so much more power. You know, it's just, there's so much, the dynamic that goes on in meetings and in working with others. It takes me outside of myself, and it makes me a part of. And I was really, really a loner. I mean, somehow, I don't know. I had some friends in high school, but I mean, not a whole lot. And more, I just, as time went on, I got more and more, you know, a loner. And to be able to now, you know that there's a group of people here, and I'm one of them, and you're one of me, and you know, we understand each other. We come in here, we hear the solution, and go back out there, and it's okay for another day. It's just like how it works. I mean, it's amazing. I jotted down one other thing here I'd found. And it was something that Wilson wrote. I got it out of one of the letters he wrote to the Grapevine. That's in that book, Letters of the Heart. And apparently, you know, he must have made some notes in the hospital when Evie came to visit him. And he asked Evie, you know, because if you recall in the big book, you know, it says Evie came in and started spouting his stuff, and Bill looked at how much gin he had left, and he's like, "Oh, I got this. I got more gin than he can talk." And so he probably didn't catch everything, but he did catch some things, like choose a God of your own understanding. So Evie came to visit him in the hospital, and after he'd had his last drunk, and he said, "What is it that you were telling me?" And Evie said, "You know, you get honest with yourself. You make a self-survey. You talk it out with the other guy. You quit living alone and get straight with the world around by making restitution. You try the kind of giving that demands no reward either in approval or money. And you ask whatever higher power there is, even if it's just an experiment, to help you find the grace to be released from alcoholism." And that's, I mean, we can find in our book a lot of, like, you know, encapsulated things, but I mean, that's like the program, you know, right there. You know, in the chapter The Agnostic, it says, the purpose of this book is to find a power that can relieve my problem. Lack of power was my dilemma. it's just I don't know. I get at a loss of words when I just try to sum it all up. But and I'm at a loss for words. Some of a couple of more notes, and I'll wrap it up here. As I said, I came into the Champions Club, and I remember this fella Ed P. used to say the craziest things. Like, what is this guy talking about? And he'd tell me the story of I know, and that he knew that he knew, so you couldn't tell him nothing. It's like, what is that all about? But I began to understand that I don't know. I think when I first read the big book, and it says that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem, and it goes on to say that though we usually don't think so. I think I read the book 5 or 10 times before I even saw the words though he usually doesn't think so, because my mind was just like, I don't think so. And I really didn't. But then it took a while, because a short piece later in the book, it goes into the story about the actor, and then that's where I got it. And the first time I read that, like he's a nice guy, and it's like, yeah, I'm a nice guy, and I'm just trying to get everybody to do. They'll be happier if they just do it my way. It's like way better, and they'll all see it and enjoy it and thank me, and thankfully, and I have to thank God, and I still have to work on it. But you know what? I can see the middle. I can see both sides from the middle now, and sometimes. Sometimes maybe my way is the best way, maybe not, maybe somebody else's. Sometimes somebody else just needs to, have it go their way. I'm just a lot more flexible, let's say, thanks to you folks in AA. And I mean, obviously, it's a lot more than that. I'm still an alcoholic. We get relieved of the obsession. And at first, I don't know what to do with that. It's kind of scary. And the book talks about how, if tempted, we'll recoil like from a hot flame. That we've recovered from this hopeless state of mind and body. But then I see people with the same level of sobriety I have, occasionally go out, and I need to remember. I am an alcoholic, and I kind of think, well, how do I rationalize that? And I was looking recently, and I started noodling on this one verse or one statement about having to be convinced. I need to be convinced that I'm not like other people. That I'm different and that I'm alcoholic, and I just need to be convinced of that. And I kind of, really meditated on that verse over a period of weeks to realize, I think that just helped me, know that, I mean, I don't know how to put it, but just that I'm still an alcoholic. I'm still a person that can't touch alcohol safely or sanely. And I just need to get my daily reprieve, on maintenance of my spiritual condition. So I think my time's getting short. I think I'll wrap it up there. But again, I just want to thank everybody in this room, everybody in all those different cities around the country that I visited and went to meetings at. And I'm going to keep coming back. Thanks for letting me share.